What is the easiest way to move an object in GDevelop? This video will show you how to do that using forces. Let's start with a blank scene, and we're going to add a couple objects. This large blue ball and the large red ball. So if we put an object out here, by default it's going to do nothing, right? It's just going to sit here like it's part of the background. Well, what if we want this to move? Let's try moving it up. So I'm going to start down here at the bottom. To add a force to this, you just click on the event tab, and we're going to create an action. You click on the object you want to move, and see where it says movement using forces. We have these options here. Let's just try the first one. Add a force towards an angle. So the angle is to the right is always 0, down is 90, left is 180, and up is 270. So we want to go up, so we're going to say 270. And the speed is the pixels per second. So let's just try 10 pixels per second. I think that's pretty slow. Let's see what that looks like. Oh, and this is really critical. We're going to leave it at instant for now. This force will only push the object during the time of 1 frame. Typically is used when there are no conditions, and basically means what we're doing here is we have no conditions. So it's every single frame, which is, there's usually 60 frames per second. This will move, and the speed will be 10 pixels per second. Let's try it. Okay, that's pretty slow. Let's make it a lot faster. Let's say 100 pixels per second. There we go. So that's going to keep going. It's going to leave the screen, and it'll never come back. It's just headed out to space. Let's see a little bit more about what happens if we do a trigger once. So we're going to see what happens on one single frame. So instead of 60 frames per second, we're just going to do, let's just leave it like this. You probably won't even see it move. Yeah, see, it moved once. In fact, I wonder if I can change it to, instead of a trigger once, we can actually make it based off a click. Mouse button pressed, left button, and then I'm going to leave it with trigger once. So every time I click the left mouse button, it will, this will actually happen, which it'll move it the same place, 270 degrees. So click, 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 click. Let's make those bigger. So if you just wanted like a single increment of movement, you could do it this way. There we go. So that's an instant force. Usually with instant force, there's nothing. There's no conditions, and it'll just go. See how it's a, what's the word? It's a linear speed. The speed stays the same. It's a constant speed is what I'm going to say. The speed is constant. It's not accelerating or decelerating. Let's change this to try this permanent option. So permanent, think of permanent as like you're putting a motor on it. So let's change this to trigger once, and we're going to give it that speed, but it's only going to be triggered once. So a permanent force is like a motor, so it should still keep going. See how it looks just like before, right? Looks like the instant force. So if you want it to keep going, we'll use a permanent force. If you take this off, trigger once off, it's going to add a new motor every single frame. In fact, I'm going to make this much smaller. So adding a new permanent force 60 times per second, it's like 60 little motors, and it's going to keep going faster and faster as time goes on. See how that was slow at the bottom and then it got faster? Every frame, it's getting a new motor that's pushing at 2 pixels a second. So if you want something to accelerate, you could do it like this. And you can even get fancy with like a condition. Let's see what we're going to do. This is red, so the red ball. We can look at its speed, and we're going to make sure that as long as the speed's less than 500, we will keep adding motors, those permanent forces. So this should go faster than just like, well, we're going to have to go slower than that. Let's try 200. So as long as the speed is less than 200, it will keep adding motors. So there, it's getting faster, faster. There, finally got it. Looked like it was going static. In fact, I'll even make it like this. So faster, faster, and it reaches maximum speed. So that's another trick you can do, is to use permanent forces to increase its accelerate up to a certain speed, and then once it hits that speed, it won't go any faster. So the other options that we had, other than add a force towards an angle, is you can add a force to move towards an object. So instead of that 270 degrees, we're going to head towards the blue ball. Let's do an instant force of 100. All right, so move the red ball towards the blue ball. Did I put the blue ball in here? Nope. Okay, so I'm going to put the blue ball here and the red ball there. So this event here has no conditions. The action is to move the ball towards the red towards the blue. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, so that's good. That's how you can make something head towards a target. Like if you want it to be shooting at something or an enemy attacking something, that's what you could do. In fact, let's get a little smarter. Let's add a behavior to this blue object, the draggable. So that'll let us move the blue object while the red chases it. Let's try this. So see how it's still the exact same, move red towards blue. So the only difference is now I can actually I can drag this red or this blue ball, and the red will chase wherever it goes. So you can make a fun game out of that. Really quickly, we'll look at these other force options. We can move a force to move towards a position. So we'll make it go to 0, 0. So 0, 0 is always the top left. Speed will be, we'll do 200. And we're still doing an instant force, so we can't have any conditions. So move the red ball towards 0, 0. So that should be top left. There it goes. And this is a fun thing to note. See how it's twitching there at 0, 0? So what's happening is it's heading towards the position, and once it gets to that position, it's going to oscillate. It's going to basically overshoot and then overshoot back and overshoot and overshoot back. So it's going to, this is a very common problem with something like this. And there is a way to get around it. It's by adding a condition, kind of like we did earlier with this maximum speed. Let's just see, when this red ball gets close, then don't add any more instant forces. So instead of the 0, 0, I'm going to stick it in the center. And the center of the screen, this is a trick you can do, is camera X. And, oops, camera X. There we go. And camera Y. Camera X and camera Y are always the center of the screen. So this will pull towards the center. Let's see what that looks like. Okay, it's going to the center, and there's that twitching. Obviously, that's not a good effect. What we're going to do is we're going to see, let's add a distance condition. The red ball and distance between two objects. No, we don't know distance between two objects. We want it between a position. Okay, let's try this expression. So this is a very commonly used expression. It's called compare two numbers. And we want to know if the distance between positions, let's do the large red ball, X, and the Y, and then we're going to do the camera X, camera Y, oops. Okay, if it's less than the speed we're going, which is 100 or 200. Okay, if the distance is less than that, we want to move. Nope, we only want to move if it's greater than. If the distance between positions is greater than 200, let's try this. So my idea is that once it gets less than 200, it will stop adding forces. Let's see if I did this right. Okay, that let's make this really small. It stopped too early. I wonder if it is the center. Let's try this. Let's go to the center of the ball. So center X and center Y are the positions of the center of the object. So we're going to measure the distance between the center XY and the center XY of the camera, which is this is the middle of the screen. And we're going to move the ball towards that. Let's see what this looks like. Oh, that worked out really good. Okay, so that's how we use this. The last one we haven't shown you is just add a force. Now this one's a little basic, meaning we've already talked about adding a force towards an angle. That's very useful. A force towards an object, very useful. Towards a position, that's pretty good, but if you don't have an object, like we went to the camera X, so if you have a fixed position, that's great. So adding a force, this, I mean, if it was me, I'd probably just use one of these, this angle, because it's easy to understand. But this one lets you add things like if you wanted to go just to the right, you would add speed on the x-axis positive. Let's get rid of that. Okay, we're going to add instant force, 100 pixels in the x-axis. So x is horizontal, y is vertical. And positive x sends you to the right, and positive y sends you down. That's why the 0, 0 is always top left. Okay, so this is 100 pixels in the x direction. Let's scoot this up here. And then we will add 100 pixels in the y-axis. And that's how you'll get this. So see how it's going at a diagonal like 45 degrees? If it was me, I would just use the add force to angle and then do 45. But there may be a reason you want to use this. Okay, stop the object. So let's talk about that. That's actually really useful if you want to prevent any previous permanent forces from affecting an object. So what I'm going to do is we're going to do a trigger once, so that's basically the beginning of the scene. We're going to give the red ball a permanent force angle, and let's just do that. Let's do the 45 degrees, and we'll do 200, and let's do a permanent. So this is a one-time engine, and it's going to trigger once, permanent force 45 degrees. It'll look like this. But remember I said it's just going to go forever and ever and ever and ever. We can add a condition that will stop it. So if I do a mouse button left click, and I'm going to copy the trigger once. So when the mouse button is down, I want to stop the forces. So this stops the permanent forces. The instant forces automatically stop every single frame. So this really only applies to permanent forces. Okay, so it's going. I'm going to click. Boom. Force is stopped. I think that covers it for the basics of forces. If you have any questions, let me know and I'll try to answer them. Thanks a lot, guys.